Hi, everybody. Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to continue our discussion on these human values, American values that we've been working on these past several sessions. I think we're coming up to the end of the pile. I forget if are there 13 of them? I think there's 13. Yeah. Yep, 13 of them. So let's see how they go. Some of these I think are really pretty straightforward. Pardon me while I backtrack here a little bit. Looking at who's on the call, I think you guys all have this, but just in case, let me just go ahead and chat this over to everybody one more time. By now, some of you probably have a half a dozen copies of this thing. So yeah, there it is if you'd like it. So informality, if you come from a more formal society, you'll likely find Americans to be extremely informal, and you will probably feel that they are even disrespectful of those in authority. I have to laugh even when I read those words. Americans, I have a giant question mark about authority. The only reason why you've got authority is because we gave it to you. We could just as easily take it away. So Americans are one of the most informal and casual people in the world, even when compared to their close relatives, the Western Europeans. Yep. So I can keep reading this, but I think we all understand that we are relatively informal, if not dramatically informal, compared to a lot of other cultures. Yes? No? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say
It's that
so.
freedom of speech thing.
Yeah. Freedom of speech, that thing. Yeah. And dressing, it's like, I when I spend time in Europe in particular, the thought that people get dressed up to go to the grocery store just baffles me. It's like, I'm going to the grocery store. I'm going as I am. So whatever it is, or they actually got dressed up to go to their equivalent of Home Depot. What? So we might be informal, but sometimes I think that the informality is also just a matter of practicality and convenience. So if there's not a reason to be more formal, then why would we choose to be more formal? So informality is also apparent in Americans' greetings. The more formal "How are you" has largely been replaced with an informal "Hi." Yeah, I don't know so much about that. So we each have our own different.
Or in or in out here in California in LA, it's hi welcome.
Hi, welcome?
Just like that.
Really? That I've
Hi
not.
welcome.
Yeah,
I
no,
never heard that.
I'm a little bit more of the howdy doody kind of group, you know. And
This is the standard in the LA area
wow,
where I
how
live.
interesting.
Huh. I haven't been down to LA
And
in a couple of years.
Yeah,
yeah,
no. Hiya, hiya.
there's no discrimination. There's no hi welcome. There's no discrimination. It's just I'm
I'm a
paid to
wow. Yeah,
makes
well,
me feel very welcome.
yeah, and I think as you go to different areas of the country and get exposed to different groups of our subculture and different regional sorts of uh, you know regional cultures and all that, I do think greetings are going to change. I know one thing that I often hear from colleagues that are from Europe in particular, they actually think that "How are you" is a question. And it's like, no, it's just a greeting. So, we don't expect anyone to get into the grand details of exactly how they're doing. You just say, fine, how are you? And, you move on.
That's one of the more disconcerting aspects of people coming here, and actually that's one of the reasons we were better off dropping it, because we don't really mean it. And
Mhm.
when these people start replying to it, they realize that no one really cares.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
like,
Yep.
well, and I think in England, that's very common, particularly, I think, in the people I know in London, the general environment there, it's really, it's kind of how you doing, but it's not like it is in the East Coast.
Mhm.
Um,
I think that it may be a remnant of the plague,
oh, yeah, because
right?
I need
Like
the
bless
answer.
you,
Right. I need the answer before I know how close to approach.
right?
Yeah.
And I think it's become formalized, and now it's then it began being questioned by people who were being just trying to be more literate or
Yeah.
something.
Yep. Well, I also learned when I was a young kid that, you know, how stereotypically they say that Indians greet one another by saying how. And that's really not the case. But they noticed that when Europeans greet one another, they would always say things like, "How are you? How's the family? How's it going? How you know, whatever it is." Everything would always start with how. And so they just said how. I don't know if that's actually true or just a bit of an urban legend, but nevertheless.
Reminds you of a good old joke, though.
Yeah, well, there you go. So
And
if you're
from a linguistic standpoint, it absolutely makes sense if that's what they observed, and it's the most common thing. How?
right, right. And so they thought, well, that's a greeting. And they also noticed that we tended to wave. And so that's why they would show, you know, raise their hand or whatever. But I think that also goes back from just showing that you don't have any weapons, that you're, you know, you're safe enough, at
Mm.
least in that moment. All right, so if you are a highly placed official in your own country, you will probably at first find such informality to be very unsettling, even disrespectful. Americans, on the other hand, would consider such informality as a compliment. Certainly, it is not intended as a personal insult, and you should not take it as such. I will tell you that I've spent time in other countries that I think are even more informal. So, for example, if you go to certain Scandinavian countries, they actually refer to their teacher by the teacher's first name and their kids, or the kids would refer to the parents by the parents' first names and that. So, you know, it's just a cultural kind of thing. And I don't think anyone means any disrespect at the same time. But I will say, and I'll throw this to you guys, if you've ever had someone from another country who is in a position of what they think is authority, and they come and want to be treated that way, how do we feel about someone who wants to be treated with that level of formality? You know? What do you think? Do we receive that positively, negatively, if they want us to address them in a formal kind of way? Do we look, you know, positive or negatively about that? What do you guys think?
Yeah, many Americans see that as being stuffy,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But it depends on. I mean, if you're conscious of culture, you don't. But if you're not conscious of culture, then you see it as being overly stuffy or authoritarian.
yeah. Or trying to create different, you know, divisions, distinctions, in some sort of a hierarchy, like you're better than we are, or whatever. So it's
Yeah, you're just trying to put me in my place. That's all.
yeah. Well, you know, and it's like I've always been a Monty Python fan, and while I can quote major passages from several of the movies,
Don't get me
this
started.
one I can't quote exactly. I don't remember what it is, but it's from um, Holy Grail, and the king is out doing whatever the king is doing, and he comes across peasants in the field,
Or an
and
arc.
yeah, the peasants say, "I am," and the king says, "I am your king." It's kind of like, "You're no king. I didn't vote for you." And they
Don't
start
vote for
talking about
king.
what, you know, they're, can you quote it there?
Well, how'd you become king then? The
No,
lady of the lake, hand clad in the sheer simmering sand, held forth Excalibur, proclaiming
right.
I, Arthur, should be king of England.
He goes,
Strange women, listen, strange women in line and palms is no basis for a system of government.
yeah, exactly,
If some
exactly.
moistened binted lobbed a scimitar at me, I don't remember much of it though.
No. It's all good. It's all
Thank God.
An innocuous, cynicless commune.
right. There he is. Exactly. So anyway, my point is that
Sorry.
we actually do
You're
wonder why people, you know, carry on such sorts of things. It's kind of like, if I were able to meet the queen, I would certainly meet the queen with that level of respect, but I don't particularly think of the queen as being somehow a better person, you know, or the king, as the case may be. You know, it's like, well, they have their job and they're doing their job, and their job came with this particular title, and it's very much seeped in history. So I don't mind acknowledging that, but I don't really think of them as being divinely, you know, appointed by God and all of that rigmarole that comes along with it. So
Yeah, see, I have I think maybe it's the opposite experience when I was in Europe working with NATO and in Milan. They insisted on calling me Signore Ingegnere Latch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
I'm like, I appreciate that, but guys, I'm not an engineer.
right, right, right. Well,
They had to put me up there so
yeah,
that I could be properly respected.
yeah, yeah. Same thing for me when I was in Italy in particular. I had to be dottore professore. I couldn't
Yeah.
just be like, I'm a trainer. Oh no, dottore professore. It's like, but here's the difference for me. It's kind of like I'm in their country. I need to adopt or adapt, as the case may be,
There
to
you go.
whatever is customary there. I don't expect them to change to somehow or another match me. Although I've said many a time to an audience, let's play a little game I call Humor the American. So let's do this. But similarly, I don't think that people coming to this country should expect us to modify our way of interacting simply because it's different than where they're from. You're here, and so experience here.
But
And
I think part of what we're talking about here with values, is that when people come from another country, when we go to another country,
mhm,
we have certain expectations based upon what we perceive as their values, what we perceive
yeah,
as their values,
right,
right?
right.
And what our expectations are of them as a result of that.
Mhm, mhm.
And then, from movies,
Well, yeah, exactly.
storybooks. And when those needs are not met, it's so disappointing.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mhm.
And I know they've often talked about how Americans have no real hesitation to talk to a stranger, to strike up a conversation, just in passing while you're waiting in line somewhere or whatever. And that's very different than a lot of other cultures. And I kind of think if we look at the change grid for a second, it may very well be that when it comes to that informality, well, formality tends to live more. What do you think? Upgrade, downgrade, in-grid, outgrid. Where's formality? Where's informality?
I would think informality is upgrade. Formality is more downgrade.
What do you think formality?
Informality is up.
Tell me about that. Why would
Well, they're a
informality?
little bit more excitable, a little more excited. They're looking for something. They're trying to accomplish something. They're in a, they
Hmm.
maybe don't know something. How do you get to the bathroom?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
you're
there's a
talking about
social task.
Yeah.
from the perspective of the visitor, I would think that our informality would move them up grid.
Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
formality would move them down grid if because it'd be more comfortable for them. But the question is really, where does formality live
So
on the change grid
where's
versus
formality?
informality on the change grid? What do you guys think?
I think maybe formality is in grid.
Formality is more in grid, okay?
Hmm.
I'm thinking formality may be more in grid because it's like planning. Um, it's a gut thing.
Yeah, yep, yeah. No, that's fine. I kind of get
It,
it.
it,
But
it doesn't take a lot of ability to be formal. You follow a pattern,
right, if it's
right?
modeled
And
for
there's
you,
not a
you
lot of
do it there.
challenge to it,
Yeah, yep. And so,
unless you're fighting something, personal about it.
yeah, and I do think that there's an amiable quality in the whole question of formality versus informality.
Mhm.
So, but that amiable nature would be more wanting to make everybody comfortable, regardless of whether they want to be formal or informal, just kind of accept them as they are. And so, on the one hand, I would probably be more accommodating to formality if I'm coming from an amiable place, but I
Mhm.
can also very easily accommodate informality because my amiable nature wants to make sure people are comfortable. Um, where I think that informality, just kind of like as a thing, is probably going to exist more downgrade because we're saying that our ability to be doesn't to take it doesn't represent much challenge. We've got great ability to do that. I don't need to be worrying about this, that, the other thing. And so I can just be down there in power apathy or even apathy about things like interactions and people's positions and all that sort of a thing. So I think informality does tend to occur in a more downgrade kind of a place,
Hmm.
where formality means I got to be on my toes. And so that feels like a higher level of challenge that might be there. Now, if you go to formality, and the reason why I'm willing to be formal with you is because I think that by somehow or another stroking your ego or matching what you're most comfortable with, I'm going to curry favor with you or whatever, that feels like it could also have an outgrid kind of an element to it. But still, the perceived challenge would be higher. To do that. Other thoughts about that? I'm not necessarily saying I'm right there. I'm just saying that's my kind of vibe when I think of people that are in a formal mode versus an informal mode.
Wouldn't someone who's a little more analytical, slightly more downgrid, to have a tendency to be more formal?
I think that they would be better at the the rules of formality. So maybe an analytical driver would be far more on board with the protocol and following those rules and doing the research beforehand. I can see how they would do that, but I'm still, I think, in that driver element. I'm doing it for a reason,
Okay.
as opposed to I'm just down here. See, down here, I'm going like, I don't really care. This is, we're in the peasant's domain. Down here, no one impresses us, no one threatens us. We're all just fine down here. So, but I think you're absolutely right. If we are outgrid and we're in a business setting or a governmental kind of interaction sort of a thing, I think those are by definition more of an outgrid kind of a set of behaviors. And so I can certainly see how some people are going to be better at being more formal here, but it's for a reason. Yeah. Anywho,
Well, it seems to me then that what we're coming to here really is that how wonderful the change grid is at stimulating a conversation about something
mhm,
that really depends upon what it is and what your situation in that thing
absolutely.
is about being formal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
What's
when the
driving?
conversation began and we got a little bit into our experiences in Italy, and then the question came to formal, and my immediate images that came were of driving in traffic in Milano
Mhm.
and here, and we have a formalized system, and over there it was like chaos to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. If you're on the road, everyone is equal. So, yeah, but here, no, it's nice we tend to follow the rules. But I think you're right. I I do think that the thought about what is the motivation behind the formality. So if I'm someone who's insisting on being treated in a formal way, well, where am I on the change grid that I want someone to treat me in such a formal kind of a way? My head immediately goes to, well, there's something inherently insecure in your view of yourself. That's why you need other people to stroke your ego and use whatever your preferred title happens to be and all that sort of thing. So,
Well, it's a cultural presumption, isn't it? I mean, in the military, you expect it's a rule that you're addressed by your rank.
yeah, but again, that's an outgrid kind of a situation. So, what's driving me wanting to be formal and what's driving their desire for you to respect the formality of the ranks? I'm sure it all goes back to because when the day comes that something really matters, you better know and respect the chain of command. And so maybe that's part of it, just trying to create that kind of hierarchical structure. But I think it's being done with more of a reason, not because people who hold officer positions are necessarily wanting their ego stroked just because they want their ego stroked.
Some do.
It may still be, but I think they're going like, no, there's a reason why we have the formality that we do have.
And whether they do one or the other of those two things is really a measure of what kind of a person in the service they are.
Yeah.
As a rule. So there's a judgment that goes with that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Amongst their peers and so forth, which may have nothing to do with how well they do their job or how great they would be to have your back.
Yep. 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 Okay. Anywho, but I would say by and large, we are a more of an informal kind of culture. I think that this continues to be true today. Do you guys think, is this something that you think has changed in the past 35 years? Or do you think we still have a tendency to be informal? Wait, I need to scroll back, sorry. That we still have a tendency to be on the informal side of things. Yeah. Yep. All right.
Yeah, I think that stayed the same. Yeah.
I think that one stayed the same.
Yeah.
Now we go to the next one. Directness, openness, and honesty. As I read this one, I kind of went, well, let's explore this. So many other countries have developed subtle, sometimes highly ritualistic ways of informing other people of unpleasant information. Americans, however, have always preferred the most direct approach possible. They are likely to be completely honest in delivering their negative evaluations and to do so publicly. If you come from a society that uses the indirect manner of conveying bad news or uncomplimentary evaluations, you'll be shocked at American bluntness. If you come from a country where saving face is important, be assured that Americans are not trying to make you lose face with their directness. It's important to realize that an American would not in such cases lose face. The burden of adjustment in all such cases while you are in this country will be on you. There is no way to soften the blow of such directness and openness if you are not used to it, except to inform you that the rules have changed while you're here. Indeed, Americans are trying to urge their fellow countrymen to become even more open and direct. The large number of assertiveness training courses that first appeared in the United States in the late 1970s reflects such a commitment. Americans consider anything other than the most direct and open approach to be dishonest and insincere, and will quickly lose confidence in and distrust anyone who hints at what is intended rather than saying it outright. Anyone who in the United States chooses to use an intermediary to deliver the message will also be considered manipulative and untrustworthy. I think there's a lot here to talk our way through.
Yeah, honestly, T, I find this completely different from my experience.
Do share.
And this is, well, I find Americans don't want to hear the truth. It's like in that movie, you can't handle the truth. Anytime I've used an open and direct and honest approach, I often get somebody that goes into their shell.
Yep.
They can't handle it.
That is telegraphing your punch, and that's why people want it. Because when you telegraph your punch, I know where it's coming from. I can block it. I can counter it.
Yeah, it depends on the culture. I mean, within the US, I mean, corporate cultures, more than half of US corporations are all about being nice to one another, even if they're about performance. And they don't want, there are hours and hours and hours wasted, as you all know, on people that somebody's afraid to give them their actual performance, rating or evaluation or feedback. And it amazes me the extent to which this is often not true. I mean, I think we want to be direct, and we're direct about a lot of other things, but we're not direct about performance in organizations, I don't think. It depending on the culture of the business and the culture.
Yeah.
And thoughts on that? I'd be curious to hear what other
Kathleen,
people.
you're right on the money. This is why I didn't make it in what we'll call a traditional large firm corporate culture. It wasn't. I'm just too entrepreneurial. I don't fit that mode. I got to call a spade, I guess, or whatever you want to say. It is what it is. I can't do that in a corporate environment.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I have the same type of approach, but I also did performance management system design for a few years, and it's just ridiculous the amount of time people spend on this stuff. So there's a lot of holes in that statement.
And do you see it getting worse, Kathleen? Because I think it's gotten worse over the last 10 years, not better.
I don't really know. I think it's probably gotten worse based on what I hear about what happens with, I haven't been dealing with that part of the culture as much, but I mean, I think given how kids are being raised
Mhm.
in school and the extent to which children are not often given direct feedback about anything in the
Mhm.
school systems, I think it's probably getting harder. And then they go into shock when they have to walk into a certain kind of I mean, I always think of Wall Street culture as a prime example of the totally blunt, up or out kind of model.
Yeah.
But you go into a big pharma company or an insurance company or a financial services company, people don't tell you anything. They basically freeze you out if
Yeah.
they decide that you're not performing, and they find other ways to basically manipulate you out the door.
Right. Well, I think with this new kind of
Yes.
woke culture that we've got that's developed over the last, let's say, 5 years, this dynamic seems to be getting worse.
Yeah.
People are so sensitive with DI that you got to be ultra careful about what you say, so you don't say anything.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Yeah, I think
you step into the corporate veneer, you have to adapt, as we were saying. It's up to you. You have to adapt to that culture, right? And the people who will adapt to that culture will work there. The people who decide that that culture is just not for them are going to leave, or they're going to be sifted out,
And
right, through
unfortunately,
the performance.
how does it affect the company when we get rid of people who are direct and open and honest and blunt?
It protects the people at the top from from becoming known for how they
Yeah,
operate things to protect
it,
themselves.
it also limits performance
right.
because performance of the organization, because people are not then striving for something different and for something better and facing failure.
Right.
And the best high performing companies are ones that talk about managing and working with failure effectively
Yep.
and being honest about it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, it's one of these things that I think a pendulum kind of illustrates really well. Maybe we have now swung too far the other way, and we're so hesitant to do anything that might upset another person that we've become more indirect, more closed, and more, I don't want to say dishonest as in lying, but dishonest as in not sharing the actual truth that was readily available to us. We just chose to repackage it. I mean, the feelings police are out there now, and don't want to upset anybody, don't want to offend anybody. You might get, what was the thing you get? You'd get canceled. Is that what was happening a couple of years ago? Was that the big word? You can
Right.
get canceled. Don't do that. Blah blah blah. Um,
Well, and the TV show, was it
yeah,
Survivor,
yeah,
right?
Survivor. Mhm.
I think, especially given this conversation right here, is an exemplary example of leading society,
Mhm.
because that show came on. They were highlighting behaviors that I watched become the norm
Yeah,
in the company that I was in.
yep. That show's been around for a very long time now, that and The Amazing Race. And so there's got to be a reason why it's so popular. And I think you're right. It really does kind of illustrate for the rest of the world, kind of a look under a microscope at how people really do interact. But it's hardly honest. That's the thing for sure. You learn real quick on, if you're a Survivor fan, that, well, what does it even say? Outplay, outwit, outlast. So there is an element of dishonesty that seems to
It's
be.
manipulation is the word that
Yeah,
comes to
there you
mind in
go.
those
Yeah,
environments. Yeah.
yeah,
It's me at any cost.
right. Now, I will say, I've spent a great deal of time around the Dutch culture. I went to a Dutch college, and so I've done a lot of work with a lot of companies. My first overseas clients were all in the Netherlands, and I can tell you that if we were considered to be direct, we were like beginners compared to how the Dutch culture interacts with one another. They don't even attempt to be diplomatic.
Mhm.
They tell you in no uncertain terms, and it doesn't matter who you are. They don't have this whole hierarchical kind of thing. People have different jobs, but everyone is equal. It's a very egalitarian kind of a culture. So they don't mind telling anybody point blank whatever it is that they happen to be thinking. And it's not, no one takes offense to it. What they do take offense to is that if you are trying to give them some feedback and you're trying to be overly polite about it, or you're trying to couch it some way, because they view that as you judging them as incapable of handling the truth.
Mhm.
And so that's a big deal. They admire you for being direct and they mistrust you if you're indirect. And it plays out in all ways. I remember I needed to go to the train station because Linda was coming into town and into Amsterdam. It was King's Day or Queen's Day at that time. And so Linda's first time in the Netherlands. And so I wanted to go to the airport to meet her. And so I get to Central Station and I'm on the platform and I walk up to a couple of the conductors that are standing there and I said, "Does this train go to the airport?" And they said, "We begin with good morning."
Yeah.
And I just went like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Good morning. Does this train go to the airport?" And they said, "All the trains go to the airport." So I said,
Wonderful.
"Thank you so much." So I thought, well, number one, they just demonstrated more than one value there. And so it is egalitarian. There is politeness and the kind of thing that is expected in everyone's behavior. And they don't mind calling you out on it at all.
I think what's funny, I agree, T, I spent a lot of time with Dutch people and in the Netherlands, but also coaching Dutch people. And when I look at some of the values, the things that we say we want to be are actually embodied in the Dutch.
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah, no, it's
mhm.
true. I wish
Well,
Dragon was on the call.
and it's very interesting that the Pilgrims came over from Amsterdam, and when I was in Amsterdam, they what they taught me was that the big reason for they were looking for people to join this, come to the New World. And the Pilgrims joined because they didn't want their children interacting with the children of the other residents.
Ah, interesting.
The attack that they were coming under was, I think, perhaps a part of this bluntness that we're talking
Yeah, yeah,
about people putting a microscope on their manner of being, and they said, "Hey, the hell with this, we're going to go over there."
yep, 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 yep.
So
I'll tell you,
that's a history
share
lesson
a
for
story
today.
with you too, to just to show how widely practiced it is. So Linda and I were on a cruise that was going around the Mediterranean and ended up crossing the Atlantic and whatever. And for reasons we never really understood, the vast majority of passengers aboard this ship were Dutch. And we were there as guest lecturers. And so all of my lectures, which are, of course, about management and all that sort of thing, most of the audience is Dutch. Well, there's this young gal in the audience, couldn't have been more than 12, 13 years old. Linda, you might even remember her name. But after one of our little lectures, do you remember her name, Linda?
Was it Greta?
Greta? I don't know. Something like that. But anyway, so after the lecture, she comes up to me and there's no difference in because she's young and I'm an older person, all that, forget all that. She just says, "It seems to me that the highest point of stress and the lowest point of apathy are the same point." And I went like, "Oh my God, first of all, that's absolutely correct." But that's hardly something you would talk about in a 45-minute long orientation to 5 levels of tension. And I went like, wow, she not only had no difficulty approaching me, she had no difficulty. I think she thought she was doing something to challenge the model. But nevertheless, I thought that was a very bold thing for her to say, very accurate. I was just really impressed. And it's a small ship. We kept seeing everyone throughout the cruise. And so we had some really, really great discussions. And she was really big about saving the rainforest and saving this one particular species of frog. And she was like, on the edge of militant in her beliefs about saving the rainforest. And of course, I always like to ask questions. So I just said to her, why do you think that the forests are being destroyed? Why is that? So she kind of understood that there's a need for jobs. There's an economic issue. There's not, these people aren't destroying the forest because they want to destroy the forest. There are other things that are in play. And by the end of the cruise, you could tell that she would really thought about that. And that there has to be a way to do both kinds of things. And I thought, oh, this is great. But yeah, so you even find this dynamic across generations.
What's interesting, we were talking about performance. The Dutch are doing the most interesting things organizationally and environmentally,
Mhm.
I think, around the world, the most innovative things. And I think a lot of it has to do with that willingness to confront issues and
Yes.
test and question. And it's a part of innovation is that ability, you know, to question and test
Yep.
and
Yep.
counter.
Yep. It's encouraged. It's celebrated. It's just really was very refreshing. Very, very good. But yeah. So do we think this is something that I think that the pendulum, as I said, I think is swung to this indirect, closed, less than honest kind of end again, but it'd be interesting to see if we can find a nice little balance.
I mean, if I can just say, make one more comment here, I think it's not accurate when it comes to talking about people's performance. I think it is accurate when it comes to just social interaction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's a task social orientation.
Yes, absolutely. Task focus, not about being nice. It's like, let's just get it done.
You're right.
And so it's highly contextual. This
Yeah.
Hey, come on, it's only a job.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. They are right though. Like I was wondering, when did assertiveness training really come into play? So in the 1970s, well, in the 1970s, I was in high school. So um, I don't really know that there was all that much in my awareness about what was being done outside of the high school walls. But I do know early in my career, assertiveness training was still a very big subject. So, yeah. All right. La, 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 da, 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 da. Let's move on. Practicality and efficiency. Americans have a reputation for being an extremely realistic, practical, and efficient people. The practical consideration is likely to be given highest priority in making any important decision in the United States. Boy, that's I can think of a whole group of people who needs to be reading this paragraph right now. But Americans pride themselves in not being very philosophically or theoretically oriented. If Americans would even admit to having a philosophy, it would probably be that of pragmatism. Hmm. Will it make any money? Will it pay its own way? What can I gain from this activity? These are the kinds of questions that Americans are likely to ask in their practical pursuit, and not such questions as, is it aesthetically pleasing? Will it be enjoyable? Or will it advance the cause of knowledge? Right away, I'm seeing different locations on the change grid for those two paragraphs. This practical, pragmatic orientation has caused Americans to contribute more inventions to the world than any other country in human history. The love of practicality has also caused Americans to view some professions more favorably than others. Management and economics, for example, are much more popular in the United States than philosophy or anthropology, and law and medicine are valued more than the arts. Another way in which this favoring of the practical makes itself felt in the United States is a belittling of emotional and subjective evaluations in favor of rational and objective assessments. Americans try to avoid being too sentimental in making their decisions. They judge every situation on its own merits. The popular American trial and error approach to problem solving also reflects this practical approach. This problem solving approach, actually invented in the United States, suggests listing several possible solutions to any given problem, then trying them out one by one to see which would be most effective. Well, right there, that last couple of sentences, I think those of us that work as consultants would say, you don't just make a list and start at the top and work your way down. We can whittle it down a lot better than that. But yeah, anyway, what do you guys think about this one?
I think it's generally true, but I think that some of these concepts get enmeshed, are enmeshed in our long-term, short-term value, which is a different value, which is about time. Because, when you look at, realistic and practical and all of that, a lot of that is tied into how fast can we do it.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, is it pragmatic over the long term? Because what we are not good at is making strategic decisions about big issues.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Run, yeah.
And so I think that's where there's a muddling of concept here. Yes, we like to think of ourselves as highly pragmatic and not sensitive and just get down to the facts and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's generally true compared to, for example, the French or the Italians or, or some other, but when you look at short term and long term to make some statement about, I don't know. The practical is likely to be given the highest priority in making any important decision in the United States. Well, not really. Not,
Right.
not yeah.
Yeah.
I think as a value that we put value on, yes. Yeah, we pay for practicality and efficiency.
Yeah.
We pay a handsome price for it.
Yeah.
We value it highly, but is it a value, an operational value?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we need to kind of look at the change grid on this one just to say that I think that our value on this particular subject depends on where we are on the change grid. Because I can certainly see that if I'm more out grid or if I'm slightly down grid, maybe I am looking for the practical kind of solution because, out grid, I'm trying to maximize profits. So I want to do my best job with the use of resources, et cetera. So obviously there's a strong analytical element coming in there as well. Maybe it's the analyticals that energy that is really valuing practical, pragmatic sorts of solutions, where if I go elsewhere on the change grid, I can say that people who tend to live upgrid, and I'm talking about personality wise, their home base is a little bit more upgrid. Are they really looking for the practical, or what are they looking for? You being expressive, what are you looking for? All right. Yeah.
You're looking at feelings, you're looking at art, you're looking at beauty, you're looking at a different kind of expression. Yeah.
Right. You want to feel something, that's what
Emotional payoff.
Yeah, there's got to be something that's engaging. It's got to be interesting, stimulating. They want the challenge. Thrill-seeking behavior is out here as well. I don't know that thrill-seeking behavior equals practical thinking. I mean, if it's a thrill that your life is in danger, it might be nice to spend some time thinking about that aspect of it. So you want it to be both thrilling yet safe. Again, we always use the example of a well-engineered roller coaster. So I get all that, but I don't think that practicality is necessarily something that everyone in America is driven by. If I'm in the center of the change grid, am I really looking for the practical and pragmatic and and I'm looking a little bit more on the whole spiritual side. Maybe this is, to Kathy's point, where we try to take a longer term look at something. So before we get out there and do something that's too far outgrid, taking action too soon, maybe we should spend a little bit more time in the center of the change grid to really go, well, that might serve us well in this moment, but at what long-term cost? Is it?
I think that where this plays out in the workplace, if you look at it cross-culturally, and my experience with it is that if you look at, for example, an American versus a Belgian or a French or whatever on teams, multicultural teams, the Americans are going to be more interested and willing to find the fastest way to get to the solution, generally.
Yep.
As opposed to the more thorough, analytical, let's take our time to get at the right solution.
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense to others, but that has been a contrast in my experience. Not with everyone, but often.
Yep. And again, I think it goes back to a lot of things that are just, practicality, I think, is also culturally driven. So, for example, one of the things that people coming from Europe to the United States often comment on is how big our cars are. And that, it just seems like it's very wasteful and blah, blah, blah. Well, spend some time in any one of these major European cities and you'll find out that parking is at such a premium that you need the smallest car possible, or there's no place you're going to be able to put it. And so you do want smaller cars, or you want cars that aren't gas guzzlers, because fuel is, we think our fuel is expensive now. Our fuel is still nothing compared to what they routinely pay for fuel in European countries. So,
And the cars absolutely must fit on cart tracks because that's how the cities grew up.
well, that's exactly right. This is how wide the road is, so that's how wide the wheelbase can be. And, so there's other reasons that's driving it, but they do look at a lot of American consumption and say, well, that's not practical. In fact, it blows my mind how often I see people in Sun City West. Okay, again, we're talking about an over 55 community. The average age is early 70s here. And these people have got these big trucks with all of this big, cargo bed behind it and perfect cargo liners. And that truck has never seen a single speck of dirt in the back of it. They've never hauled anything, yet they have these giant vehicles. And you go, well, it's hardly practical. But for whatever reason, it's there's another value that's coming into play there that is taking precedence over practicality and that,
Well, there's power in that. There's some.
There is, of course.
You know what I couldn't get it off mute, but I started teaching assertiveness in 1971 for a community college in Green Bay. So it goes back. And I also think that assertiveness came as a result of Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. The women's movement, I think, is what really prompted the United States to get into assertiveness. I think that was a
I think
spawn.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
In fact, I would be surprised if it isn't even true today that in a business setting, if two men get into a big argument and are fighting for their position and blah, 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 that's viewed differently than a woman trying to assert her viewpoint on something. It's still labeled in a much less positive way for women to behave in that assertive kind of way, which again, I mean, I freely acknowledge that that's
and there were and there were
That's
a lot
because
of
only
jokes.
Mama ever acted that way.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And there were a lot of jokes, that if a man said it, he was, the man of the year. If a woman said it, she was a bitch. There was a lot of
you're right.
stuff
You're
like that.
right. I don't think that's gone away. It might have softened a little bit, but I think it's still there.
Other than Nikki Haley, if you saw the debate last night, I thought she did a great job.
Yeah, I didn't
The
watch
3-inch heels, Cheney, and 3-inch heels, and she said, "No, it's ammunition, not a fashion statement." Did you guys see that?
Yes.
No, I missed it. I gotta watch the rerun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, but yeah, it's still part of what's happening out there. So all right, so I would say that maybe if we look at the business world, to Kathy's point, maybe that's where we're going to find a greater emphasis placed on practicality and efficiency and all that sort of a thing. But we got plenty of people that are down grid and just don't have enough energy or enough productive tension to worry about such things. So it's good enough. It's, we talk about effective versus efficient versus elegant. Downgrid, you just care about it being effective. Upgrade, you just care about it being effective because there's too much tension going on for you to stop and think it all through. It's when we get in the middle of the grid that we have the luxury now of weighing out all the options. And if we're in too big of a hurry, then we're going to end up doing things that are more, outgrid, reactive, impulsive, get too engaged too soon, execute too soon, and then there's another price to be paid for it later on down the road. Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts before we do the last one? All right, let's put this subject to rest by looking at the last one here. Materialism and acquisitiveness. Yeah, it goes back to that whole truck thing in Sun City West. I mean, I got to tell you, you have to watch people try to get in and out of these things. You see a lot in Sun City West of these really big trucks, and you see a lot of Corvettes. And okay, I'm 66 years old. And one of my favorite memes is the one that said, when you get to be our age, you don't sit down on the floor without having a plan on how to stand back up. And so, so you get into some of these cars and you just go, oh my gosh, I got to get out of this thing. Or the big trucks, you've got to climb up into the thing. So, the race cars that retirees have always wanted, the reason why they've got these giant trucks and these sports cars is because it's something they've always wanted. And now that they've raised their kids and they're retired and they've got some income that they can enjoy, well, there they go. So materialism and acquisitiveness. Foreigners generally consider Americans much more materialistic than Americans are likely to consider themselves. Americans would like to think that their material objects are just the natural benefits, which always results from hard work and serious intent, a reward they think, which all people could enjoy were they as industrious and hardworking as Americans. I'll just throw in there that what they don't seem to mention in this little section here is that we really do still hold that there's a difference between old money and new money. And old money behaves in a very different way. People that have generational wealth are far less likely to buy designer stuff and try to have all those trappings of the crazy. But people that are new money that still feel like they need to prove something to somebody, oh yeah, they do that. We do find some of that true even in over 55 community. Obviously, if you come to Arizona, there's not just a few of these communities, there are dozens and dozens of them. And some of these communities are very much catering to people who, even though they're retired, still feel like they've got something they need to prove to themselves or other people. And so, it's interesting. Yeah.
I see one thing that's conspicuously missing, and I suppose that's because this was done in 1988, and that's a cell phone.
Oh, yeah, certainly. If we scroll up, they might talk about an expensive camera or an electronic calculator. We've rolled those things into one. But yeah, think about when Apple, or probably even on the other side of things. What's it called? It's not iOS.
Google?
Huh?
Google?
Yeah, Google. But what's the other kind of phone technology? If you don't have
Android.
Android, yeah.
Android.
I mean, I gotta believe that whoever's coming out with a brand new phone, there's going to be a line waiting outside the door on the day that thing goes on sale. And so it seems to be a lot of people who want to have the newest, the greatest, the best, whatever. And that's certainly not us.
And kids even have these now.
Yep. So
Right.
one or more color television sets. Okay, how many television sets do you think? you guys have, particularly if you start counting your computers as television devices, you really can at least do streaming stuff. A tape recorder and a record player. We don't have either one of those things. Video cassette recorder, an electric hair dryer. Yeah, I'm sure those are still around. Electronic calculator, expensive camera, a clothes washer and dryer. Yeah, how many of you, by the way, feel that a lot of the things that we could go out there and buy, like washers and dryers and refrigerators, have gotten too techy, and all we really want is a washer and dryer that washes and dries clothes, and all we want is a refrigerator that keeps the food cold, you know? I don't know why my refrigerator needs a motherboard. So a vacuum cleaner, a powered lawnmower for cutting grass. Why do they need to tell us that?
Yep.
Isn't that
An
funny?
electric
They just,
lawnmower.
yeah, what else would I use a lawnmower for if it's not for cutting grass?
Right.
Refrigerator, stove, one or more automobiles. Yeah, so obviously this is very dated, but I do believe there's still a certain segment of our population that is in that material kind of mode. But I would like to think that all of us at our ages have outgrown that, if we were ever part of that, but we still observe it all around us. Yeah. You guys agree, disagree?
Agree.
Totally agree. I mean, we don't have holidays anymore without opening stores. You can't give people a day off on the holidays because, we've got to have all the stores open to catch the sales. So I think we're toxic about our materialism. Personally,
Yeah.
that's me.
Everything used to be closed on Sundays.
Yep.
I remember that well. Yeah.
Yep.
Really?
Oh,
You better
yeah.
fill your car with gas if you were going to travel and put an extra can in. Yep.
Yep.
Even gas.
Even when I was
Sunday
in
blue
college,
longs.
I can tell you that no, nothing was open on. The only thing that was open on Sunday was the newsstand, so you could go get Sunday paper.
Wow.
So that was it. There was nothing else open on a Sunday. And well, I went to a college in a small college town in Holland, Michigan. So
Wow.
which is conservative to begin with and very religious to begin with, but it's the Dutch Reformed Church. So yeah, it's a very different kind of
Beautiful town, though. You're
it's a
spoiled.
great. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, guess who plants all those tulip bulbs? It's the students at Hope. You can,
Yeah.
any one of us who wanted a job planting tulip bulbs, we could have them. Not a problem. Not a problem. Yeah. Okay, well, so that's it. I do think this has probably softened a little bit. Americans value newness and innovation. They sell or throw away their possessions frequently. Well, part of that, how many of us all realize that things are just not made the way they used to be made?
Mhm.
You know?
Yes.
So I remember the very first microwave I ever bought, I think I kept for at least, I don't know if I said 15, 20 years. That thing would
Yeah.
not break. So, yeah. Okay. So we could get into this comparison sort of a thing, but I think it's too outdated to bother with. But I did think it was interesting to take a look at these different values and see if they've actually changed, if we've made any progress up the spiral dynamic. And I certainly think we have in many ways, and in other ways, we're still hanging on to the values that, were at least valid in 1988. So with that, I will come up with a new subject for us to begin next week. And I will wish you guys a wonderful next few days, and we'll talk again soon. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all. Have a good day.
Everybody.
Cheers.